Hello, everybody. So, welcome to our guest mentor session with Elizabeth Strenzel. I pronounced your name correctly, didn't I, Elizabeth? Okay,
Yep,
good.
you got it. Yeah.
Awesome. Elizabeth is a therapist, and she is also our boundaries badass coach for this afternoon or evening, depending on where you are on the East Coast. And she's going to be walking us through some really, as she said, her secret steps to adding more boundaries into our life and especially into our business. So, I'm excited to have Elizabeth here. Elizabeth, you can take it away and give people a little bit more background into you and your whole setup for today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks to everyone who's catching the replay. I'm so super excited to be here and welcoming you to the first day, or maybe not the first day, but another day in your Boundary Badass era, living the life that you desire and deserve. So let's get right into it. So I'm Elizabeth, as Brenda said, a former psychologist and former chronic people pleaser turned boundaries coach. And I help women trade people pleasing for boundaries so that you can eliminate the stress, resentment, and exhaustion that you've been carrying around and start living the life that you deserve and desire. So, a little bit about me. I am a 20-year educator and school psychologist. I'm also a certified life coach. But the most relevant experience that I bring to this work is from my life as a former chronic people pleaser. I was helping everybody else do all the things and taking none of my own advice, and literally was exhausted, falling asleep at my desk at work when I had a light bulb moment of like, I actually am not just tired, I'm burnt out and I need to do some things differently. So that set me on the trail that led to here, and we're going to go through a lot more of that together today. So super excited to be here with you. And more importantly, beyond all of these titles, I am a girl mom to a newly turned 9-year-old. I am a lover of all things dessert, especially vegan desserts if you can find them. I have one child, but I've got about 30 plants, and you can find me traveling anywhere and everywhere that I can. These are from some recent adventures. I went to Hawaii for my 40th. That's in the middle, and it was awesome. So that's a little bit about me professionally and personally. And I would love to know who else is in the room. I see Bridget and Linda. If you want to drop an emoji that tells us your mood or where you're joining from, or come off mute, I'd love to say hi to you if you're comfortable.
Sure, I'll just share and say hi. Glad to be here. I'm just down the road from Brenda on Vancouver Island, and we're snowed in, and got a bit of a cold, so that's me.
Thanks. Glad you're here.
I'm Linda. Glad to be here. I left another Zoom early to come and support this and
Oh,
hear what.
awesome.
Yeah, thank you, because I love this. This is so powerful and so important. And I am a former people pleaser, but I still find myself, because I'm the observer of my life and so self-aware, I'll find myself rushing to meet someone and like, what is happening? Why am I doing this? It's because I fear disappointing or, you know, so I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for
Yeah.
this.
Awesome. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
I can go if you want to, Elizabeth.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
First of all, that was an amazing introduction. I loved it. It's like so
Uh,
much energy. It was amazing. And your photos and your daughter. It's like it's so beautiful.
thank you.
Like Bridget, we just got a dump of snow on Vancouver Island. So yeah, we
Mm,
are all a little stranded right now. But I put my little like this little guy in the chat, that emoji, just because
nice.
yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation. And I didn't even know about boundaries until like maybe 5, 6 years ago. Like nobody like
Yeah.
raised me and said, "Oh, you need to develop
Yeah.
boundaries." It was just kind of like you must do everything all the
Yeah,
time, 24/7.
exactly.
So I'm excited for
There's
this
there was no one
conversation.
talking about boundaries in my household either. So
Yeah.
you're in good company.
Yeah. Okay. Even now
Exactly.
today, if I bring it up with my mom, she's like, "Go away." Like,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
anyways,
It
this is gonna
feels
be a good
very new
conversation.
agey. Yeah, exactly. So we're going to get into all that today. I'm so glad that all of you are here, and hey and hello to anyone catching the replay. I'm glad you're catching it too. So, all right, by the end of today, we will have a clear understanding of the hazards of people pleasing and how boundaries can help. Because, spoiler alert, people pleasing is not just a fluffy new age nice to have. Boundaries, rather, are not just a fluffy new age nice to have. We're going to get into that. I'm going to go through a 10-step process for boundary setting that I work on with clients in individual and group coaching, and you can start implementing this right away. And we're going to talk about some unique boundary considerations for entrepreneurs in particular, because I know that everyone here is a business owner, entrepreneur, and there's boundaries that we can have in all aspects of our life. And there's a couple unique things for entrepreneurs. So let's get into it. Is people pleasing really that serious? So, yes, people pleasing is not just a polite form of conflict avoidance. People pleasing, especially chronic people pleasing, is actually self sabotage. It's a violation of our needs, of our self respect, of our worth, and it primes us to tolerate bad behavior from other people. Because when we are conditioned to deny our own needs, to go with the flow, to say yes when we mean no, we are conditioning our brain to be comfortable in that very unhealthy space. So then when other people initiate actions that position us the same way, we are used to that. So even if we don't like it, it is familiar, and it is more likely that we will tolerate that from other people because we've already set that condition up for ourselves. So there's sometimes this perception that, people pleasing is just like the quiet conflict avoider in the corner who just wants to make everything nice. And it's like, yeah, that may be one face of people pleasing, but at its core, it's really consistent centering of the needs of others at the expense of ourselves. That results in negative side effects like loss of self-trust, suppressed dreams, burnout, headaches, muscle aches, fatigue. We can develop all types of psychosomatic symptoms. I had chronic migraines for years as a result of chronic people pleasing, anxiety, resentment, exhaustion, depression, loss of identity, so on, so on, so on, so on, so on, so on, so on. So this is a really very significant and very debilitating pattern that many of us fall into unintentionally. And we're going to get into some of why that is later on. But I just want to name right up front that the reason I'm so passionate about this is because from my own lived experience of chronic migraines, fatigue, anxiety, depression, all the things, and from what I see with other women, it actually is that serious. And I think we can't even really fathom the lives that we would be living if we weren't in this pattern, because we've become so conditioned to just go along with whatever. That it's like, if we were to free up that mental space, give ourselves back that energy, actually give ourselves permission to show up in our own lives, imagine the things that we could do. So why do we do it? If this is such a like, oh my God, people pleasing, the sky is falling, why do we do it? Because most people, if you ask them, no one sets out to be a people pleaser. No one's like, that sounds really great. I would love to be like that. Who needs boundaries? I've never met anyone that feels that way. And yet, when I talk to women about what I do, they're like, oh my God, that's so important. Oh my God, I'm a people pleaser. Oh my God, I used to be a people pleaser. So why do we do it? So what do you guys think? What are some reasons why you feel like we fall into this pattern even when we intellectually know it's not what we want to do?
Fear of loss, like fear of loss of a friendship, fear of loss of a relationship, a fear of rejection, abandonment.
Absolutely. All those things. Yep.
Oops. And it sometimes feels like it's the easier route.
Yeah. It's familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And I was going to say also like familiar and like with family, with traditions, with culture, like maybe that's just how we've always done it. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's also maybe the blame or the name calling of like, well, you're being disrespectful.
100%. It's like, it's all of the stories that are underneath the behaviors. What are the things that we've told ourselves about relationship, about loyalty, about respect, about family, and how does this behavior that I'm thinking of engaging in come up against that? So absolutely. One of the most common reasons, and you guys name many of these, I'm going to touch on these. I see 5 very common reasons why people are engaging in this pattern, even though they really don't want to. Number 1, sometimes we've normalized a lot of bad behavior. How many times have you heard someone say, oh, that's just how mother-in-laws are. That's just how bosses are. That's just how men are. There's like this collective settling. And so sometimes we go along with stuff because we actually don't believe that it can be better. So we're like, okay, let me just make this person happy. Let me just do this thing. Let me just do that thing. Not actually thinking like the better is possible. Another one is we don't believe we deserve better. So many of us are walking around with lingering or unaddressed issues of insecurity, low self-esteem, feelings of low self-worth. And so we believe that our value comes through our relationships and the affirmation that we get from other people. And we like to hear things like, oh, you're so loyal, you're so dedicated, you're so selfless. And that just really affirms us. And so when we don't think that we can just be good enough on our own, we're constantly trying to make other people happy. And sometimes our people pleasing, and I used to do this too. I don't know if you can relate or anyone watching this later can relate, but like I was sometimes people pleasing in advance because I was trying to manipulate the environment to make sure that people liked me and that it went the way that I wanted because I was so insecure that I was like, okay, well, how can I make them happy and how can I make them like me? And it's like no one even asked me to do half of these things that I'm burning myself out to do. I'm doing them because I don't feel worthy to be in the room. So I feel like I constantly have to prove and do and serve and give just to be enough. That's a big one. Fear, you guys touched on this. You're afraid of what will happen. What's this person going to say? What are they going to think of me? Is there going to be a big argument? Maybe it's just easier to avoid it. Like there's so much fear and guilt wrapped up in our people pleasing and our avoidance of boundaries. This next one is a big one. So stopping the behavior would disrupt how we define ourselves. So if I like to define myself as a hard worker and suddenly I'm contemplating setting boundaries with my boss instead of just saying yes every single time she calls me, now I have to confront, well, am I still a hard worker? Or if I want to see myself as a generous person, but now I'm considering setting boundaries when my family asks me to borrow money. Am I still generous? How much is enough to say yes? How many times? It starts to get fuzzy, and we have attached our identity to that reinforcement that we get because people pleasers get tons of positive reinforcement. You're so helpful, you're so cooperative, you're so dedicated, you're so this. And that becomes a part of how we see ourselves. And so breaking that pattern requires us to redefine, well, what does it mean to be generous? What does it mean to be a hard worker? How much is enough? How much is too little? What do I? And so it's very challenging is a lot of times we'll just keep doing the things we've been doing because we're not quite sure how to redefine ourselves in the context of having boundaries. And then the last one is lacking the skills. So one of the big things that I work on with people in coaching is helping them to discern, do you have a problem of will or a problem of skill? So a problem of will means I know how to set boundaries. I know how to stop people pleasing, but I'm afraid. I'm worried about what they're going to think. I'm avoiding it for some reason. I feel guilty. Whereas a problem of skill is like, no, I believe I deserve it. I'm ready. I know I'm entitled to it. It's not wrong, but actually I have no idea how to do it. Because when I was growing up, no one ever said the word boundaries. No one ever said the word people pleasing. I was just taught, be a good little girl, be nice, don't cause a problem. So here I am with all this conditioning and all these things to do. And now I've become an adult who's reached burnout, who realizes like, oh my God, I don't want to do that anymore. But what do I do? How do I say it? What do I say? What do I do if they push back? How do I tell my boss? What? And so there's a huge skills gap because this is not something that we've ever had to do before. So you guys hit on a little bit that of that, and those are a couple more of our reasons. So how do we stop? Without the fear, without ruining our relationships, without guilt, how do we actually stop this debilitating people-pleasing pattern that we desperately do not want to be in, but we just don't know what to do differently? How do we do that? Before I go on and get into like steps or how or anything like that, is there any questions or comments? I can't see the chat while I'm screen sharing. So if there's something in the chat that someone wants to offer up,
Yeah,
please feel
Linda
free.
said, I think this is a good one here. I feel this too, Linda. I feel guilt because I'm not volunteering as much anymore. I was a big sister with, I think, big brothers of something. Anyway, something like that.
Mhm.
Big brothers, big sisters. And I walked dogs at a rescue, but I don't do it as often for a few reasons. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm
it's
like,
very common.
I'm having guilt. And it's like, why am I having guilt?
Yeah. Somewhere along the line, like the should syndrome, is back there somewhere of like, oh, I should do more, I should volunteer, I should do this. And it's like one of the things that I work on with people that it may help you in this situation. I've tried to use it myself and I still use it because this stuff continues to come up even when you learn it, is like a process of first recognizing what's the story that we're telling ourselves. So, okay, I'm recognizing, oh, I'm feeling guilty for not volunteering. Like, why? And then the second step is to like interrogate that and start to ask questions like, well, why do I have that story in my head? Whose voice is that? Where did that come from? Is that even true? Is that what I would tell someone else? Like, so first we're recognizing it and then we're starting to reframe it. Like, do I have evidence for that? If a friend talked to me about this, would I tell them that? And then ultimately replacing it where we're rebuilding and reprogramming our operating system so that this story that we're telling in our head is healthier and more functional. Because a lot of us are walking around with these stories that we inherited somewhere of like, oh, you got, the good little girl syndrome has now produced a generation of adults who are still doing things we really don't want to do because we feel like we should, or when we don't do them and we actually have the courage to stand up, we're debilitated with guilt and we feel like, well, I may as well have just done it because I thought I was standing up for myself. I thought I was doing the right thing. And now here I am. The 3 hours that I would have been volunteering, I've spent those 3 hours spiraling in my mind with guilt of having not done it. I should have just done it. So getting underneath that story and like, where does that come from? Do I agree with that? Am I willing to let that go? Is really a process. And I think what you're describing is so relatable. Anything else on like the backstory, the mindset work, the how did we get here?
I think it's a
Anything
lot
else?
of worthiness, is the underlying piece. If you don't feel worthy, or like I feel like I owe because I have, or I don't know what it is. But yeah, I think what you said about affirmations from others is gigantic because the person with the low self-esteem and self-worth like loves to be told that they're great or that they did good. Yeah, so that's a big one, the external validation.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes like a drug, and then we just do more and more and more to seek it, and we struggle when it's not there. And the thing is, like, there's nothing wrong with getting positive feedback from others, but it's a matter of balance. And how are we affirming ourselves? And are we giving ourselves permission to define success, or have we given that power away to someone else? Because for as long as we're giving that power over our self-worth and self-esteem to someone else, we're going to be people pleasing for the rest of our lives. So it's difficult, but it is a necessary shift. Yeah. Awesome.
Very good.
All right, so let's get into a little bit of process. So, how we know why do we people please? We don't want to do it. It's so big and bad. How do we stop? Okay, well, we could stop by avoiding difficult people, by setting a bunch of rules to try to control others, by ignoring what we know about how damaging it is and just keep doing it anyway. We could cut off our relationships. No, obviously, no. We're not doing any of these things. We can't avoid difficult people, unfortunately. That's not possible. We cannot set a bunch of rules to control difficult people. We can only control ourselves, frustrating as that is. We could choose to be ignorant and pretend we don't know what we know about how damaging people pleasing is, but I don't think any of us really want to live in that space. And we could choose to cut off our difficult relationships and, live solo on a deserted island somewhere, but I don't think any of us want to do that either. So instead, we're going to set boundaries like the badass that you are. Okay. I love Queen Bee. I don't know if we have any other Beyonce fans tapping in, but I cannot get enough of her. She's such a boss. And this is you, proverbial you. So how do we do that? How do we learn to set boundaries, and what even are boundaries? Let's do a quick fact check. I told you my background is as an educator, so you can come off mute and try to fill in the blank here. Boundaries are parameters that we set up for blank. Rules and expectations are parameters that we set up for blank. How might you fill that in?
Success.
Us is okay for the first one. Okay.
Um,
Mental health.
Yeah, mental health. That could go there. Yeah.
good, self-preservation.
Self-preservation. Yeah.
Um,
Rules and expectations are parameters set up for what? Or who?
I was going to say for my values,
Okay.
like so that I stay in integrity with my values, right? Versus compromising
Absolutely.
to please someone else.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of ways we could answer this, and you guys have hit on a few. At the core, boundaries are parameters that we set up for ourselves to align to our values, our belief system, our self-worth, our self-preservation. It is the mechanism by which we care for ourselves and our needs, and that is actually our responsibility. And sometimes we outsource that intentionally or unintentionally through affirmation from others, through support from others, but that's our responsibility. Rules and expectations are parameters that are set up for other people. And where it gets tricky in this space is the desire to try to control other people or manipulate the environment through other people's behavior. And there's a lot of misunderstanding around boundaries, that it's like, oh, you're trying to control me, or you're trying to do this. Actually, I'm not. The simplest explanation that I can give for this is that a personal boundary that I have is I do not engage in conflict that involves loud yelling or name calling. I find it very triggering. I just totally shut down. I cannot participate. I've learned this about myself the hard way. It's just not a space I can operate in. Some people love to fight it out, and if that works for them, do you. But for me personally, that doesn't work. So a boundary is that I'm not going to participate in a conflict that has name calling and loud yelling. A rule would say, you can't yell at me. A rule would say, you can't call me a name. You can do whatever you want because you are a grown adult and I cannot control you, but I'm not going to participate. So the boundary is, if XYZ occurs, I will fill in the blank, remove myself, disengage from the conversation, potentially end a relationship, whatever it is. But we want to be super clear. Like, if you can't say it in an I statement, it's not a boundary. It's a rule. It might be a shared expectation. It might be a mutual agreement. It might be whatever. There are a lot of other terminology circulating, but for the purpose of today's conversation, we're defining boundaries as I statements about our own decisions, time, body, values, money, communication, whatever, because it's exactly what you guys were saying. This is the way that we govern ourselves to take responsibility for our energy, for our experience, and ensure that it aligns to our values. Because guess what happens when we don't do that? Guess who pays for that? We already know we pay for it because we went through that whole people pleaser slide, but who else pays for that? The other people in our lives that are not treating us badly pay the price for the boundaries that we do not set with difficult people in difficult situations. So when I don't set boundaries with my boss at work, my daughter pays for that because I'm exhausted and resentful. When we're arguing in the morning about getting her shoes on and getting out on time, it has nothing to do with how fast a 9-year-old puts on their shoes. It has to do with the fact that I didn't set boundaries around my time, so I went to bed too late, so I woke up exhausted, and then I was taking it out on her. We have to take responsibility for the way that we experience the world and the circumstances that we're in, and boundaries are the tools to do that. Because while it feels like a responsibility, it's also an opportunity, because then we get to show up and we get to experience the world in the way that works for us. And then we're better to ourselves and ultimately we're better to others. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was going to say, Elizabeth, as soon as you brought up your daughter example, I was thinking for sure my children. And I mean, you said earlier, we have created a generation of, because I think like women especially, but men also struggle with this as well, like whether or not you're sort of that Gen X or millennial, but like I think it was just sort of like, I don't know, maybe I'm making an assumption, but just sort of an obvious thing that past generations, our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation would just inflict these sort of boundary breakages anywhere, because it was just sort of, again, cultural things that we've talked about before. But I think we have a responsibility for the next generation, because like we see it, like mental health is on, like issues are on the rise. People are struggling with anxiety, with depression, with sleep and disorders, all these type of things, and it's impacting us in our health, diabetes, heart disease, all these things, right? And it's just like we know that they're all stress related, which could be resulting in the fact that we don't have boundaries or rules or expectations
Absolutely.
set up for ourselves or other people in our lives. So if you're a parent, for sure, and I'm not trying to coach parents, but I'm a parent and I've thought about this a lot, but also just, if you can impact other, just from that next generation, I'm going to work on myself. And then so the next generation doesn't have to continue with this legacy.
100%. Because when we talk about like generational wealth, this is the generational wealth. Emotional health is the generational wealth that we can leave to our children or to other women that we're in relationship with, nieces, godchildren, friends, community members. Like, if there's something that we don't like about the experience that we've had, how can we create a different reality for women that come alongside us and behind us? So absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so let's get into what can we do about it. So the very first thing that boundary badasses do is they get out of their own way. And this goes back to what we were just talking about earlier with mindset and belief systems and stories in our head. An activity that I do with people in coaching is to get really clear on their origin story, which is to understand their relationship to people pleasing and boundaries and their beliefs about people pleasing and boundaries, and basically how did I get into this situation? And we go through 3 questions. The first is what seeds were planted. So this is like, what were the direct things that people were or were not saying to you about relationships as either a child or in your formative adult years? What did you observe other people doing? What was the discussion around it? What was either explicitly taught to you or modeled and reinforced about how you stand up for yourself, how you advocate, what you deserve, your self-worth, obligations, family obligations? Those are the seeds. So that's like, where did it start? And just being aware of like, oh, I learned that here. And that is not to shame and blame the women and adults in our lives that came before us. Most people are doing the best they can with what they have. And I believe with all of my heart and soul that my mother, grandmother, and the women in my life had no idea they were conditioning me to be a people pleaser. They were trying to teach me what they thought I needed to be successful. And for many situations, that was survival for women. So it's not to shame and blame, but it's to invite us into a conversation or reflection of like, where did this actually start? And then what watered those seeds? So the seeds are just like what exposed you, your early learnings, your early exposure, whatever. What watered that is the reinforcement. So we talked about getting positive praise for being a people pleaser, hearing positive feedback, affirmations. What kept it going? It started here with what was modeled or reinforced to me. Then this is what kept it going. This is what watered the tree. And what do the branches look like now? Am I exhausted at the end of every Friday, dragging myself to the finish line? And so my weekends are just about recovery so I can do it all over again on Monday? Or am I enjoying the weekends because I'm lighter and I'm free and I'm not overburdened? So where did it start? What kept it going? And then what does it look like now? And getting clear, especially on that, what does it look like now, will help guide you through where do you most need boundaries, because you're clear on what are the biggest pain points. So for me, I went through this exercise of like, what did it sound like then? So that story in my head, the seeds, all of that. And what does it sound like now? This is another exercise. You can do this at home on just a sheet of paper. It's an exercise we go through further in coaching, but it's like what it sounded like. The people pleaser narrative sounds like, oh, they're going to be mad at me if I do this. You know what? I don't even feel like hearing their mouth. Let me just do it and get it over with. It's just going to be easier if I say yes. Confronting them is going to be so uncomfortable. Now, what it sounds like is, well, I deserve relationships that aren't chronically stressful. Setting boundaries is not unreasonable. We literally have to reprogram our operating system, because what happens with boundaries is people want to skip right to the last step of, okay, well, just tell me what to say. And it's like, we got to go back, because 98% of the work happens before you even open your mouth to set a boundary. It happens with confronting your mindset, affirming your self-worth, figuring out how you got there, figuring out what do you need most, what are you going to say, how are you going to say it. All that has to come first, and then you're actually in the conversation with the person setting the boundary. So the very first step, we're going to now go through these 10 steps that I work on with people in coaching. I have this in a guide as well. If you'd like, I can send it to you after this if you just drop something in the chat. The first step is to get clear on the why, and we've talked a lot about that. For me, the why was this girl on the left. That was me as a child, but that was metaphorically what I was doing as an adult. I was asleep in my own life, exhausted. Okay. The second step is, okay, I'm clear on my why. I deserve it. I realize I'm super stressed out in this area. Oh, I deserve a better life. Okay. Step one, I'm clear on that. Step two, where do I start? So we can set boundaries in a lot of different categories. This image here is from a positive psychology article. I can send that to you if you're interested. But you can set boundaries around your finances, your physical body, your time, your emotions, your conversations. There's all types of areas, your job, how many hours you work. There's all types of categories of boundaries. And sometimes what happens is when people, they reach their point of burnout, they're ready to set the boundaries, they just want to do all of it at once. And it's like, let's maybe start with one or two, because that could be a little bit intimidating and a lot. So after we've gotten clear on our why, the next step is just to choose a boundary category, one or two places you want to start. And I encourage people to like work their way into it. So if you decided family is your area where you want to start, you have a lot of what you feel like are challenging or unhealthy dynamics, you want to start setting some boundaries around, maybe try to get some reps in with things that are a little bit easier, like standing up for yourself if they get your order wrong at a restaurant, or turning your phone off at night a couple hours early, or declining an invitation. Like, get your practice in a little before you start telling your mother-in-law, I'm never coming to holidays again, because that's like the top of the pyramid. So choose a category where you want to start small, and brainstorm a few possible boundaries. Start coming up with, okay, well, if it really, stresses me out, the type of demands that my family has for me, well, maybe a boundary I could set is I don't go to holidays at all. Or maybe a boundary I could set is if we travel together, I stay in my own room. Or maybe a boundary I set is if we're going to spend time together, I don't engage in conversation about XYZ topics. You're just coming up, I've narrowed it down to family, and now I'm coming up with a few things of like what might work in this situation. Then what you're doing, step 4, is you're checking for feasibility. And here's what I mean by that. So this is a picture of my family at Christmas, I think a year or two ago. Sometimes boundaries, when people are setting boundaries in their family, for example, they're like, okay, I'm not doing holidays anymore. A check for feasibility asks you to pause and think about, okay, if I do that, are there any unintended consequences of that? So if I decide I'm not going to holidays anymore because my relationship with my brother is so contentious that I just cannot be around him, it's too stressful, that might be a choice you want to make. Are there any unintended consequences? Well, then I don't get to see anyone else at the holiday. Or, if I do this, here's all the things that come along with it. That doesn't mean don't do it, but you want to be thoughtful, because sometimes what happens is we overreach, or we choose a boundary that doesn't work for us and it doesn't go well. And then the conclusion we draw is, oh, boundaries don't work. And it's like, no, they do work. You just might not have had the right plan. You might not have chosen the right boundary. You might not have had the right support. So checking for feasibility is asking you to think through, okay, if I do this, are there potentially any unintended consequences? And if so, is there an alternative? So maybe instead of saying I'm never doing holidays again, it's, well, I will do holidays, but I don't stay overnight. I'll do holidays, but I only go for 3 hours. I'll do holidays, but I'm not discussing my parenting or my romantic relationships. Whatever it is that would make it so that it works for you without some of those unintended consequences. Then the next thing is you're making a plan for, what are you going to say? How are you going to say it? Is someone going to be there? Is someone not going to be there? Is this over the phone? Is it in person? You have to think these things through, because when we don't, like, again, sometimes it doesn't go well and it's like, well, that could have been avoided. So we're actually going through like making an actual plan around how, when, what, whatever. And then we're practicing. So if you follow me on social, I'm training for a half marathon right now. I've run 2 of them in the past. Last year when I did the race, I did 75 workouts over the 12 weeks to train. We don't ever go into anything that is high stakes without practice. So why would boundary setting be different? I'm not saying practice it with the person, but say it out loud to yourself in the mirror. Call a friend and do a run through with them. Record a voice note of yourself saying it. Write it down in a notebook. The reason for this is you don't want the moment of the boundary setting conversation to be the first time you have ever said these words out loud, because that's likely to be an emotionally triggering situation. The person might push back, you might be feeling nervous, and you don't want to be coming up with something on the spot. The same way you would practice for a job interview, you might think about what to say on a first date before you go. We often prepare for high stakes situations because we want them to go well. Boundary setting is the same thing. So in part of the coaching model that I use is to give people the space and time to practice so that they can like feel it out a little. Ooh, that didn't sound so great. Let me try to say it a different way. Maybe I want to do this. You got to practice. That's number 6. Step 7 is to anticipate and plan for resistance, meaning how are they likely to respond? You know your people, you know your boss, you know your husband, you know your so-and-so. How are they likely to respond? And if that happens, what might you say? Now, the point of this is not to obsess about having the perfect words, because there are no perfect words. We're not in the business of convincing people that our boundaries are justifiable or deserving, but it can help you to feel prepared if you've thought about it in advance. And I have a whole boundary scripts. What can you say if they push back? If you're interested in any of that, like I said, drop it in the chat or we could talk after. But you just want to think about this, because you don't want to be flustered in the moment. And then now you're scrambling like, oh, what do I say? What do I say? What do I say? So we plan for that and we practice it. Step 8, super important, is a self-care strategy. Like, boundary setting is hard. And I recommend that people really think thoughtfully around their systems of care as they are venturing into this territory, because you're going to want a soft place to land. Anytime we're doing hard things, when you're training physically, you have rest days. When you're going really hard in one area of your life, you do something, to treat yourself or to feel good. You sleep late, you do whatever, you get together with girlfriends. You want to have a self-care strategy to keep yourself encouraged and supported, because this work is really hard, and you don't want to quit or backpedal on what you deserve to do just because you don't have the support around you. Step 9, just do it. We're not waiting for perfection. There is no perfection. You just have to get out there. And then step 10, reflect, refine, repeat. How did that go? How did I feel about my delivery? Would I want to change anything? You're reflecting both on how you did it, and you're reflecting on the actual boundary itself. And we have, tools for all this in the coaching program. So those are the 10 steps. I'm a big proponent of plan, practice, do, and reflect, because you don't want to go in blind, but you also cannot wait for perfection. Like, there's a balance there. Any questions on the steps before we transition into a little bit about questions, comments, reflections, anything on the actual process before we talk a little bit about some specifics for entrepreneurs? Okay. All right. So what do you notice about these photos? What is something that these photos have in common?
You're in all of them.
I'm in all of them.
You got a smile in all of them?
Yeah, I do. In the marathon, it's a forced smile, but yeah. The common denominator is that this is the same me. Me, the mom, Elizabeth, the mom, is also Elizabeth, the entrepreneur. That was me during a coaching session in the white, is also Elizabeth, the friend, is also Elizabeth, the athlete. It's the same me. Brenda and I talked about this when we did an Instagram live together. There's one you. So the idea of fully compartmentalizing your business boundaries from your personal boundaries is really an illusion, because it's you in all of these spaces. So if you desire to show up with integrity and high quality energy and high quality service capacity for clients, your personal life can't be running all over you, and vice versa. So if you desire to show up as a present and thoughtful sister, partner, friend, community member, but you have no boundaries in your business and it's running you into the ground, what kind of energy do you think you're bringing to your personal life? It's still you. This is like the essence of a lot of Brenda's work, to be aligned. Like, we are one person. So when you're thinking about boundaries, it's not fully compartmentalized. Like, there's nuance, but it's just one us. And this has to be like a lifestyle thing. So there's only one you. You can only give what you have. And what it took to get you to where you are right now may not be what it's going to take to get you to the next level. A lot of us, especially as women, have had to grind, hustle, scrape. I know I have. My journey is definitely started from the bottom. Now I'm here personally and professionally, but that's not going to get me to the next level. That overgiving, overdoing, overachieving, go, that is not the skill set or the energy that is going to take me to the next step. That's what I had to do to survive in periods of my life, and I'm grateful that I could do it when I had to do it. But there is a plateau to what I can offer as a human and as an entrepreneur if I'm constantly in grind culture. So we have to be willing to realize that parts of ourselves have to evolve if we are going to be in service of others. So I think there's a couple categories when we think about boundaries for entrepreneurs. I kind of bucketed it into 3 major categories, and I would love to hear from you guys if you think there's others or examples of others. But I see this as having an obligation to protect our mindset, our time, and our experience, or our client experience, rather. Sorry, I can't see my slide with the thing. Okay. So protecting our mindset. That's thinking about things like, well, what do you consume? Who do you listen to? And how stable is your personal life? One thing that I learned for myself, so in 2024, I was restarting my business after having a break, and I really prayed that God would introduce me to the people that had the knowledge and skills that I needed to grow as a business owner. And I got that in abundance. And what I realized at one point was like, oh, I'm actually over consuming coach content. Like, I was listening to too many people, I was downloading too many courses, I was following too many people on social, and it was too much. And I had to really stop that and like narrow it way down to a much smaller group of individuals and communities, because the information overload was causing me to be frantic in my strategy. I was second guessing myself, and I was just disorganized. And so part of offering, like part of showing up positively and genuinely as a business owner, I think, is guarding our own mind. And some of that is even guarding it from too much of a good thing or too much influence. Similarly, who are you listening to? You know, comparison culture, it's very vulnerable. Entrepreneurship is very vulnerable. So we have to really be thoughtful around who are we listening to and what are they telling us about ourselves, about themselves, about whatever. And then how stable is your personal life? So when I was working as a psychologist, at one point I was in an abusive relationship. I was definitely not bringing the best of what I had to the people I was serving at work, because I was getting beat up outside of work. So you have to be conscious of how you, like, we're just one human and we have to protect our mindset. Abuse is an extreme example, but there are much more subtle examples. What are the influences over your own mind, and how does that show up in coaching? Protecting your time. So how disciplined and organized are you in your work schedule? Are you using time blocking? Are you using calendars strategically? Are you being thoughtful around, like, at this time I do this task versus just random? How often and through what means can clients access you? So I did an Instagram live with, I think many of you know her from being introduced here, On Brand with Sarah. She does marketing and coaching. And we were talking about coaching for free in the DMs and giving too much, you know, what is the line? Like, can people reach out to you anytime? Is there an expectation that you're always available? Like, how often and through what mechanisms can your clients access you? Because sometimes in our desire to give and our desire to serve, we're too accessible, and that drains us. And then what happens is the people who are paying us get a less high quality service, because we're giving away everything for free to anyone and everyone who's popping up in our DMs, because we don't have boundaries around our time. So that's the second category. And the third one, protecting your client experience. So sort of connected to that is like, what guidelines do you have as an entrepreneur around what you say yes to or what you say no to, which opportunities you take on or don't take on? How do you ensure that the clients that are paying you and that are loyal and engaged in your community are getting what they paid for? Like, how do you preserve yourself to be able to offer that? So I know there's lots more examples that we could touch on, and I would love to hear from you guys if we have time. But when I think about my own application of boundaries into the world of entrepreneurship, I tend to think about those three big buckets: my mindset, or my mind, my time, and the client experience that I seek to offer. But I would love to hear from you guys, your thoughts on that, or other ideas that you might have for anyone who's listening.
I would say my energy, but I guess that kind of goes along with the mindset. I really pay attention to how I feel. And like I had something at 5 o'clock, then I had that, and then like earlier today, and I just like decide, like I'll think, how do I feel right now? Do I feel drained? Do I feel, that I have the space? And then, well, you made a commitment, or that's probably good for you. So like I kind of run it through my mind, like what's the best decision for myself? I mean, even though there's a replay, oh well, I mean, I'm talking about the 5 o'clock one. And I'm like, well, but you probably won't watch that replay because I know you. So you're probably better off just doing it. So I'm doing better with a lot of things. And it's also like not responding immediately to all the things that happen on the phone, like the emails and then this, and I'm doing a lot better with it. And it feels really good, actually.
That's great.
Thank you. And then
That's
the
great.
only thing that I will say is the different version of me used to respond quickly, not to be a people pleaser so much as get it done because you might forget or you like to get it over with, right? But I'm really being more chill about all of it and just trusting, and it's kind of like, yeah. So, but I think my energy, I think is mindset and energy are pretty much very same. But yeah, thank you. This has been amazing.
Yeah. Thank you, Linda. Any other thoughts or questions on boundaries for entrepreneurs?
I guess I resonated with what you said regarding sort of coaching and content and so on. Because and that in for me, it's also a bit of a procrastination thing as well. But it's just I sort of cutting myself or making a clear decision to say, okay, you're kind of maxed out here. You got other stuff going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, spend the time with whatever thing it is and gain from that. And then if you feel the need to move on,
Yeah.
and try something else. But it's also too a matter, I think, of trusting myself to say, really examine, what do I think I'm needing here, or I need to
Yeah.
get out of this. What about just yeah, not participating and doing more absorbing of what I have learned in the past, or that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And so something that you just said made me think of something, which is like sometimes we need boundaries for ourselves, like from ourselves. So like a time limit on social is an example of a boundary we can set for ourselves if we know we have an inclination to procrastinate, and we can get really tricky with what we tell ourselves. Like sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'm doing market research, I'm doing blah blah. And it's like, no, girl, you're avoiding the tasks you're supposed to do, and you're browsing on social and telling yourself you're not, and like I'll need to set timers on you can set limits on app will notify you when you've hit your limit or whatever, or timers, because sometimes I need a boundary from myself.
I want to share something.
Yeah.
I I just realized, like, because like I said, I pay attention to how I feel, that I like hadn't had any like fun, like joy.
Yeah.
So I messaged a friend and we met at the beach, and like just to get away and take myself to a different, instead of like you said, the hustle, the grind, the
Yeah.
this, and it's like all these things, like we're entrepreneurs. We have
Yeah.
this ability to take space and time to go for, some time. So I did that, and it always benefits me when I do that, even though there's that for that part of you that's like, oh, well, you missed Brenda's networking meeting. Oh, you missed, you could have this. But it's like, no, this is
Mhm.
healthy. This is
Yep.
healthy for me, right? And then
Yep.
always good comes from it, like just
100%. 100%.
I like what you said about like you sometimes have to set boundaries with yourself. You can be like,
Yeah.
I say you, but it's really me. I can be um constantly thinking about like the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And sometimes if I just either set a limit or say, you know what, this is what I'm doing for the next 30 days in my business. Yes, other people may be doing these 10 other things over here. I don't have to do it all. I'm just focused on doing these three things and it's going to be fine. Like it's almost
Yeah.
like a little bit of a scarcity mindset and then coupled with not setting boundaries, right? So it's like then I got to do
Yeah.
more, do more, do more versus like
Yeah.
more doesn't necessarily mean better. So
100%. 100%. Thank you for that. I want to just allow open space for questions if anyone has them. Anything that we have talked about that you're wondering about, or um, yeah, anything at all. Floor is open.
and
I love
Elizabeth,
oh, sorry, go ahead. You go
I
ahead.
was just also gonna say too, Elizabeth, one of the questions I have, but it's also just like to give some time for that. And sorry, Linda, you can go next, is how people can work with you. So beyond this workshop today, just let us know what that looks like if someone wants to do some more work with you, either that's here live or watching the replay.
Sure. So I have something about that here. So I work with people through either one-on-one coaching, Boundary Bootcamp, or Boundary University. So it's a little bit of like kind of find what works best for you. So Boundary Bootcamp is a one-time workshop. It happens on the first Thursday of every month at 8 p.m. Eastern time on Zoom. And it's a one-stop shop. It's 2 hours long. And it's essentially like that 10-step process that we went through. It goes through that, but in much more detail with a lot of role play, scenarios, live feedback, a bunch of resources and toolkits to go. It's a super hands-on session. So it's not like I'm just talking the whole time. Like we're all talking, it's a working session. That's on the first Thursday of every month. And if we're not already connected on Instagram, You can find all the links there, or this QR code will take you to my website where you can learn more and sign up. But if you're looking for just like an introduction or like, yeah, okay, I think I want to get a little bit deeper, Boundary Boot Camp, it's $33 first Thursday of every month. Boundary University is a 6-week group that takes a lot of those same concepts, some in the framework, some that we've talked about tonight, and goes much deeper. I just finished the launch cycle, so that is closed for the time being, but I will be relaunching it later in the spring. So if you're interested in something that's a little bit deeper, I say this is the difference of like a one night stand versus a relationship. You're a relationship gal, meet me in Boundary University. If you're not, no judgment, take what works for you. And then if you're like, yeah, I'm a relationship gal, but I'm a one-on-one kind of relationship gal, that's one-on-one coaching is available if you prefer something that's more personal, private. So I'm at Boundaries Over BS on Instagram and TikTok, or you can scan the QR to the website where you can learn more. But thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I'd love to answer any questions if anyone has any before we go.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we capture that before
Yeah.
anyone came off. So Linda, do you want to go? You had your question.
I was just gonna say, like, I was at Starbucks the other day, and no, was it? No, it was Dunkin' Donuts, and I had a $50 bill, and I was with the dog, and I didn't have any wallet or anything. I just grabbed, and she was like, it was this whole thing about the $50, and they couldn't take it, and then I said, well, whatever, and then they put too many creams, and I left, and I was like, ugh. Like I really didn't I wanted one cream, and I was just ended up doing nothing, but it didn't feel, it was just like, and I left a tip, like $1. It was just, it didn't feel good. And when you said like practice and like, if your food doesn't turn out good, like I like all that, but like that whole, I didn't know, I just let it go, but I really wanted to, actually, the thought was to call management after and just what I experienced there, because just how I was treated like almost like a criminal because at a 50, but these are people working at Dunkin' Donuts, you know what I mean? That was my
Yeah.
other like rationale. Well, they're not intelligent, like, or that, not, no judge. I mean, don't now see, I'm worried what you think of me because I said they're not intelligent because I work at Dunkin' Donuts. I'm over here worried what you think of me. But I'm sitting here basically all this BS in my mind over a
Yeah.
freaking coffee. Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you
Well,
have
and
to
I think that sometimes like we can get ourselves into a bit of a spiral where like when we're seeking to change a behavior and in a moment we don't demonstrate that, then we like beat ourselves up. Why didn't I do it? And have I actually made progress? And I thought I wasn't a people pleaser anymore, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like the truth is we're always making a calculated judgment in the moment, and every new moment is an opportunity to choose something else. So maybe in that moment you just weren't in the mood. Like that doesn't mean
Yeah.
like you've regressed and lost everything you've been working on. It just means in that moment that wasn't the choice that you made. And we're always making a choice based on our energy, the desired outcome. And I don't think we have to see any one situation as like an indictment on
Yeah,
our state of
true.
development,
Yeah, yeah. And then there was one other time in that but these are lessons. It's either a win or a lesson. So, and to me, I experience lessons often, and that tells me I'm still in the BS. I'm
And
still in.
also another way to think of that is that it tells you you are a committed learner and
Thank
that
you.
you're open to the lessons, because behavior is just information. Behavior is information about what we need, our state of development, our desires. So it's really our choice if we want to judge ourselves for it or learn from it. Like those are the options.
Yeah.
So I
I,
would frame it as, I'm getting a lot of opportunities to lean as a learner. That's it.
yeah. And then also is your boot camp, it's 33 a month and it's like month to month or
It
something?
it's a one-time thing. So you can come back each month if you want, but it's the same session. It's like an evergreen type of
Pay
content. So
one? Oh, okay.
yeah, you pay once. I mean, if you really wanted to come back again, you could, but it's $33 per workshop, but it's the
Oh,
same workshop. I just offer it
oh,
on a recurring basis for new folks. So,
oh, got it. Okay.
yeah.
Good.
So it's happening this Thursday, the 6th, 8 p.m. Eastern on Zoom if anyone's interested or you know someone that might be interested. Um, and then it repeats again, first Thursday of the month after that.
Okay, very cool. This has been really great. I mean, it's just self-awareness is gigantic, and that's what this whole thing
Yeah.
is. I
Yep.
think.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Elizabeth before we sign off for today? And it's been a really great session. I love your energy, Elizabeth. Very informative.
Thanks.
Yeah,
This was fun.
thanks.
You guys were a great group.
Appreciate